Scary Eire. Eire is the Irish or Gaelic word for Ireland. Paranormal means all the things that are impossible to explain by known natural forces or by science. And Ireland is steeped in lore, ghosts, blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice, hunger, desperation, and charm. Oh, and the paranormal. Welcome to Scary Eire.
Mark Manning.
Well, strap me to a pig and roll me in the mud. Can you believe we are 4 Scary Eire shows in since we launched on the highly appropriate date of Halloween? And indeed, my thanks to Mark Johnson of Paranormal UK Radio for allowing it all happen. Now, it may be a sunny December day in Dublin, but we'll soon get dark and cosy. Incidentally, if this is your first time listening, remember the first 3 shows featured everything from Ireland's ancient East to the paranormal anomalies of an Irish military barracks to dead air of sorts in a top Dublin radio station, and Scottish and Irish castles and stately homes were all discussed too. So do check those shows out. Simply Google Scary Eire, that's E-I-R-E, Paranormal Podcast. Now, I need your contributions, and it helps if they are Irish related, but don't let that exclude you if you've a supernatural expialidocious story to share. Just simply email it to paranormalireland@protonmail.com. Remember, you can arrange that I interview you, or you just tell it and I'll read it out, or why not get technical and send a little MP3 or an M4A off your phone and just send it to the same address, paranormalireland@protonmail.com. That's how it works. Okie dokie, top of the morning and the bottom of the evening. 2 super interesting guests today. Shortly, he's not only a teacher but author too, and he's standing by to reveal all about his new haunting publication. And if you stick around, our second guest doesn't just bear the name of a global and historic cocktail brand, but in his own right, he has many creative talents, one of which is a filmmaker. He'll be relating scary goings-on the Belgian-Dutch border in the 90s and revealing how he conducted a clever experiment on 3 separate mediums in an attempt to get to the truth with surprising results. Our first guest is raring to go. But first, listen up.
Yeah, a couple of things over the years, but I've learned, well, I suppose it's not learned, I've just become accustomed to it, and I think it's kind of, it's maybe it's another sense or something. But often when you go into places, you'll get a feeling for the place, and you'll get a feeling of whether or not it's comfortable. And whatever causes that, who knows what causes that, but we have an intuition, we have an inbuilt intuition. I can't describe what it is or where it comes from or the physics of it or the chemistry of it, but it's there, and anybody will tell you to stick with your intuition. If you think something doesn't feel right, then don't hang around.
Superb advice from regular contributor to Scary Eire, David McGlynn, aka The Squire. And don't hang around either. If you've got an Irish paranormal tale to tell, simply email paranormalireland@protonmail.com and it'll be read out for you. Or you get to tell it on air yourself. That's paranormalireland@protonmail.com.
Well, I never thought I'd see the day when Manning would meet Fanning. On the other end of the line, I've got author extraordinaire, particularly in the children's realm, Kieran Fanning. How you doing, Kieran?
Not too bad, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure, because we have a little bit of selling to do here, because I've seen your latest publication. What's it called?
It's called Haunted Ireland, an atlas of ghost stories from every county.
Age group, who are we talking? Who's this aimed at?
It's kind of aimed at children, but it's kind of a family book. Like, a lot of adults are reading it, so it's kind of for 10 plus. It's kind of designed to appeal to adults as well.
Yeah, I've been there when you're reading a little story to the child and she starts to go, or he starts to go to sleep, and you're going, this isn't so bad.
Yeah,
I've
reading
been that
yourself,
parent.
yeah.
And your own background, where do you hail from originally, Kieran?
I'm from Wicklow originally, West Wicklow, a small little place called Stratford-on-Slaney. It's near Baltinglass, West Wicklow, and I'm living in County Meath now at the moment.
Were you of the land or on a farm, or what's the story?
Yeah, farming background, sheep farm, a very rural background, traditional Irish Catholic upbringing. But I wasn't much good on the farm. I was, in fact, I was kind of useless on the farm. So I was much more interested in the world of the imagination and drawing and playing games and writing stories and anything but farming. So my brother took over the farm and I went in a different direction. I became a teacher and I also write books for kids, textbooks and fiction.
You must have done an awful lot of research.
Yeah, I did a lot of research, kind of a lot of internet-based research, books, and then traveling around as well. But yeah, I did a lot of research. The trick was to find a good story from each county. Some counties had lots of brilliant stories, like in particular in the West, like Cork, for example, had loads of great stories. Other Western counties had fantastic stories. And, perhaps they survived longer over there, because it was less industrialized and less colonized, shall we say.
Sure.
The tradition of the Shanachie, that travelling storyteller, lasted longer in the West. And I suppose rural electrification came later to the West as well. And a lot of people say that electricity was kind of the death knell of the traditional storytelling. So for lots of reasons, the West was full of these brilliant stories. Struggled a little bit more in the East and the Midlands, but yeah, it took a lot of research because I needed to have not only 32 stories, but a variety of stories. Like a lot of these stories, they have similar counterparts in each county. So for example, my Loftus Hall story from Wexford is the traditional story of the dark stranger turning up at the door, and it turns out to be the devil, and his cloven hooves then are spotted beneath his trousers.
That's in the Hellfire Club
that
as well.
It is, yeah. And it actually pops up in every county, so nobody wants to read 32 of those stories. So it needed to be, there needs to be a variety of stories. So I wanted to include things like the Banshee, different types of ghosts and monsters as well. Like there's a monster down in Leitrim called the Dovar Coo, which also populates lots of lakes in Ireland, but it's a monster that was described as a cross between a dog and an otter, but huge. And in Leitrim, in Glenade Lake, this monster in the 16th century supposedly killed a girl, and her gravestone can still be seen with this little ancient inscription of a monster on it in a nearby graveyard. So I wanted to include a variety of stories. I wanted to include witches, like I have Alice Kittler, the first witch in the first convicted witch, woman convicted of witchcraft. Now she actually escaped punishment, but her maid Petronella de Mead was arrested in her place, and she was burned at the stake, and she was the first woman to be burned for witchcraft in Ireland. And like what followed that was the killing of nearly 10,000 women across the world for crimes of witchcraft. So it's horrific stuff, So yeah, I wanted to include lots of different types of stories, like banshees. I have a banshee, a famous banshee from Dunluce Castle. You probably have heard of Dunluce Castle.
North.
Yeah, it's up in Antrim, and it's made famous recently by the Game of Thrones. It was used in that. Yeah. And I have then Marjorie McCall from Armagh. She was famously lived once, but was buried twice, and her ghost haunts the graveyard there in Belfast. So I wanted to include a variety of stories. So yeah, a lot of research went into it, but we got there in the end.
Probably tried to track down a lot of old books as well.
Yeah, I did, and the library service in Ireland is fantastic because some of the books I got were incredible. They were really, a lot of them weren't on the shelf. They were held in archives, and some of them were really old. And when I kind of Googled some of them were valuable and rare and cost a lot of money. Like I got a book from Westmeath, and it was worth a couple of thousand, and they just sent it to me in a brown envelope, So it's an incredible service. A lot of these stories are preserved by the libraries and also the internet. There's various archives on the internet that have made it their business, including Google Books, that are kind of scanning all these ancient texts and putting them online for people to read, which preserves them. It's great, So internet and library was the main source of research.
In your own case, do you have a little beta testers there in your pupils? Do you read stories?
I do.
To them? Yeah.
I absolutely do, yeah. And I tested loads of these stories on the kids because my publishers, for one in particular, wanted me to take it out. It was the Dublin story. It's called The Dollacher. And it was a story I found in an Irish penny journal, a really old one, about a kind of a phantom pig that roamed around the inner city Dublin, the Liberties, and it had the head of a pig and the body of a man. And for 2 years, people were afraid to go out at night, women especially. But that story, the publishers thought was a little bit too kind of close to the bone and too scary for kids.
Wow.
So I brought it into school and tested it on the kids, and they absolutely loved it. So we managed to keep it into the book, you know.
Good man.
I think we underestimate kids sometimes. The gorier and the kind of spookier and the better for them. I don't think it's, you know, I think we underestimate them if they think they're going to be scared by things that maybe we are. They lapped it up, and it was one of their favourite ones that they read. So yeah, I read a lot of them to the kids, and some of the stories that were my own favourite weren't theirs. They had their own ones. So often, you know, the real test of a story is when you read it to an audience. But yeah, so kids are very upfront about it, but they love, you know, there's something, it's kind of a rare thing, stories now, like we all have iPads and Netflix and screens everywhere you turn, and there's something old-fashioned and kind of romantic and kind of communal about gathering around and just listening to simple words and letting the words create pictures in your mind. You know, you make your own special effects. You make it as scary as you want in your head. You know, there's something kind of something kind of cool about that, you know.
What's cool is it's involving your imagination, you know, and that's
Absolutely.
what all kids always had, the imaginary friend, theatre of the mind in action.
Absolutely, yes. Stephen King calls it the last form of portable magic is a book.
Wow.
I think it's a good phrase. Although I like yours as well, the theatre of the mind. I think that's good too.
Let's look at two phenomenon. The Banshee. Have you got a county and a Banshee and the gist of the story?
Ban is woman and she is fairy, so it means a fairy woman. And traditionally the Banshee was connected with certain families. So not every family had a Banshee in them. But if you heard the cry of a Banshee, it meant somebody in your family was going to die or somebody had died. So there's Banshee stories all over Ireland. Now, with technology and as things moved on, a lot of people say that those cries were the cry of a fox. I don't know, Mark, if you've ever heard a fox cry, have you?
I am like Snow White in here, Kieran, right? I'm in Booterstown in Dublin, and yet I'm only remarking on this recently. I've squirrels coming over the little studio I have here. I've foxes out the front. So to answer your question, yes, I do.
So a lot of people believe that was what people thought was the Banshee. But anyway, the Banshee in my story is the one from Dunluce Castle. She was the lord of the castle in the 13th century, was a man called McQuillan, and his wife died and he brought up his daughter Maeve alone. She didn't turn out exactly the way he wanted her. He wanted her to be a kind of a royal lady and to act like a lady, but she preferred to dress in servants' clothes and help around the castle, and she preferred to get down and dirty and help the servants. She wasn't into the kind of the posh stuff
Lady
at all.
Muck, yeah.
But Lady Muck, yeah. So she met this guy and he was very fond of her because she had a beautiful smile and she was very caring to the poor and she often gave them money, and he was really impressed by her, and they started seeing each other and they kind of fell in love. But of course her father wasn't happy with this because he would look out his window and he'd see his daughter dressed in rags, working with this other ragged fella, and he didn't want a future for her. He had her lined up to marry one of the local neighbouring lords. So he kind of confronted her and she said, no, I love this man and you can't stop me. And he said, I can't stop you. And he brought her to the highest tower in the castle and he locked the door to teach her a lesson. But she was stubborn like her mother and she wouldn't leave the room. And she said, I'm going to die in this room. I'll not change my mind. And he said, fine. They both were stubborn. So he left her locked in the room. Of course, he fed her. He employed a servant to feed her. And she, as was her way, got very friendly with the servant, and she convinced the servant to bring her some wool and knitting needles so that she could while away the time knitting. And every time the father came up to ask her, had she changed her mind, she said not. She hadn't. And when he would spy her knitting, he would get a little bit of hope and think that she was going to knit a bridal shawl for herself, but she said it was her death shawl, and that he would, if he didn't change his mind, she would see him dressed in it as a corpse, not as a bride. So things were kind of getting bad. She was kind of losing a lot of weight. He refused to give in. She refused to give in, and he was a proud man, and he didn't want to be seen in those days, to give in to your daughter. So he came up with a kind of a plan. He decided to get friendly with the servant that was bringing food to Maeve, and he arranged for the servant that she would escape. And so the servant let her out, and the dad knew all about this, and Maeve escaped, and she met her beloved boyfriend in a cave underneath the castle called Mermaid's Cave. So McQuillan, her father, was looking out through the window at his beloved daughter he loved, escaping down to this cave in a boat to meet her true love. He kind of felt happy, you know, he thought that she would come back and all would be forgiven. But as he was watching her boat go into the cave, a terrible storm arose. The boat came out with Maeve and her beloved inside it, and the storm grew wilder and the boat started bobbing up, and McQuillan, the Lord, was getting kind of more anxious and worried. The boat went under the water. He shrieked in terror and sent all of his servants down to search the waves for his poor daughter, and she never turned up. And he spent weeks and weeks and weeks searching the shoreline and never found her. Until one day he was on the beach and he looked back up at his own castle to the tower where he had locked up Maeve, and he saw a light in the window. And in the window he saw Maeve dressed in her shroud that she had been knitting, and she was crying. And of course he ran up to the room, and when he got up there was nothing but the shawl. And that was the beginning of the Banshee. Maeve was dead, of course, but she became a Banshee, and for years, for hundreds of years afterwards, her cry would echo out in the castle if somebody was going to die. And indeed, sometimes she even saved a couple of people. There was a famous story where she saved somebody from a storm by pulling them out of the way before part of the castle disappeared. But that was, so that's the Banshee of Dunluce Castle, and people say at night time you can still hear her forlorn cry coming from the ruins of the castle.
Wow. I think that place is close enough to the Giant's Causeway.
It is, yeah. It's on that causeway coast there, yeah.
Can we go somewhere now, finally, for a poltergeist story?
Yes, we have probably the most famous poltergeist was the Coonin poltergeist in Fermanagh. So that was about 1913, I think. I'll just check now in a second.
Relatively contemporary, yeah.
Relatively contemporary, and the house is still there, and you can go and visit the house. And there have been 2 attempts in the last 20 or 30 years to restore the house and open it as a tourist attraction, because there's quite a lot of interest in it and a lot of people visit it. But on both attempts, the planning fell apart and it never came to pass. Perhaps the poltergeist is still driving people out of the house, you know.
When you say house, I think I know this one. Is it more of a ramshackle little affair than a house?
It's a little cottage, yeah.
Cottage.
Yeah, it's a little cottage, yeah. And the story goes that a Murphy family, a widow and her children moved into the house, and all was going fine until one night the widow had, I think it was 4 or 5 girls and an older son, and they heard kind of noises in the bedroom. And they heard noises in the loft, and the loft was where they stored potatoes. So she sent the son up, and of course there was nobody up there. So they went back down. They were kind of all awake at this stage, and next minute noises came through the walls, and it sounded like kind of the rustling of straw and a wind blowing, and it kind of got louder and louder. And the poor family were up all night and exhausted. So the next day they went down to the local parish priest, as you do 100 years ago, and they got the priest around, and the priest decided he would stay in the house and see. And of course that night he heard the same noises, and he stayed in the house for a week, and the noises appeared every night, and the only thing that would silence them was when he said mass or when he sprinkled holy water. And there were a few occasions when the noises manifested themselves in kind of more violent ways, where plates would fly off the dresser. And there's one occasion where they went into an empty bedroom because they were all in the living room sitting around the fire, and a shape materialized under the sheets of the bed. The shape was kind of it was kind of slithering like an eel, and when he spoke to it, it disappeared. There were other occasions then when the priest would ask the poltergeist to answer him, you know, so he would say, yes. He would ask it a question, and it would say knock once if it's yes, or twice for no. And he would ask it questions like, you know, he would give it a kind of multiple choice questions, say, what county am I from? Do you think it's A, Cavan, 1 knock? You know what I mean? And and every time the poltergeist would knock incorrectly, you know. So word got out in small community, and everybody started talking about this house. Some people were suspicious. Some people thought that it was the kids playing tricks on the priest, you know. So the neighbours in particular, and the family started to be shunned. Other kids in the local school weren't talking to these kids because they thought they were in league with the devil. But a lot of the neighbours were suspicious that the kids were playing tricks on the priest, so they decided to do a little experiment. And a couple of the big, strong farming neighbours came in, and they each sat in the house and each held one of the children to make sure that they weren't making secret noises. And as the night went on, the noise appeared, a whistling noise, and the lights dimmed and the fire went down, and one of the farmers got hit on the head, and another farmer felt knocking under his chair, and the men, who were big, strong, brave men, ran out of the house, determined never to come back. It escalated. The noises got worse. The family were distraught. A couple of other priests, experts, were called in, and there was 3 priests in total, had spent weeks in the house, and they each witnessed all sorts of manner of poltergeist activity, but they couldn't solve it. Like the poltergeist would quieten when they would pray or when they'd sprinkle the holy water, but nothing could make the poltergeist leave. And in the end, the family left and they got on a boat and went to America. The house has been abandoned since, and you can go and see it. There were a couple of stories I read about the 3 priests afterwards, that the 3 of them suffered various illnesses and nervous breakdowns. Like the BBC did a couple of episodes from the house, and the investigators picked up paranormal activity, and one of the investigators said it was the most haunted place she had ever been in. So it's kind of, it's in the middle of nowhere, and it's kind of a creepy place, I
have a little bit to add to that. Apparently they weren't rid of it when they went stateside. It followed them.
Yes, I had heard that as well, did you hear they followed them onto the boat, the poltergeist, and there was, seemingly on the boat to America, there was the neighbouring cabins complained about noises in this Murphy family cabin.
It's been fascinating talking to you, Kieran. This book, Every House Should Have One. What's it called? Where can people get it?
Well, it's called Haunted Ireland. It's published by Gill. It's a beautiful gift book. It's a hardback. It's got these fantastic Gothic illustrations from Dublin illustrator Mark Hill. It's called Haunted Ireland, an atlas of ghost stories from every county, and it's available online and in all good bookstores.
Fantastic. And can we give a little shout out there to Mark Hill? Does he do that full time?
He does, and he's a photographer as well. But his work is superb. Like even the cover I'm looking at here, the cover has Alice Kittler on it, and he puts lots of these Easter eggs, these hidden little clues in it. So if you look at the cover, Alice Kittler has a necklace. It looks like an ordinary necklace, but when you look closer, it's actually got 4 wedding rings on it, each belonging to our 4 dead husbands who died under mysterious circumstances.
That's intriguing. So it ain't just an illustration. There's a little puzzles there to be worked out. I love that, because again, that'll engage somebody's imagination. And as I said earlier, it seems to go right across the spectrum. Children and grown-ups are going to enjoy this. Thank you so much for talking to Scary Eire, Kieran.
Thanks very much, Mark.
Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Mark Manning.
Well, one good turn deserves another, and this morning I was pleasantly surprised to see Scary Eire and consequently Paranormal UK Radio being plugged on the unexplained.ie website. These guys have been around a long time, and they're about to launch a project called Phantasm Collective, which is Ireland's newest paranormal investigation series. They unveiled the official trailer, you can have a listen to it here, that blends supernatural encounters with science, led by investigators Anthony Kerrigan and modern-day witch Jessica Murphy. The show takes you deep into Ireland's most haunted locations, exploring the paranormal through spiritual, psychological and scientific lenses. I certainly hope to have Anthony and Jessica on the show soon. Give it a listen and follow it up. And our next guest is less than a minute away.
My name is Anthony Kerrigan.
And I'm Jessica Murphy. We are members of a paranormal psychical study group called Ghost Eire.
Established in 2009, we have travelled all over the Isle of Ireland, reaching out beyond the veil, delving into the minds of numerous spirit beings, yet managing to maintain rational thinking towards strange phenomena.
In this series, we'll be examining the possibility of human survival and the mystical activity associated with it. We'll visit several historic locations, working alongside our team, other paranormal crews, and experts in the field to find definitive answers to the most thought-provoking questions.
This is the Phantasm Collective.
Lucas,
Mark!
my main man, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm preparing myself to go walking this weekend for 3 days, and we're gonna do the whole Belgian coast. So yeah, I'm taking care of provisions, drinks, these things. But I'm okay.
That's good. Hey,
You?
I'm fine. You say drinks. Lucas Bols, isn't there a drinks company called that?
There is.
Any relation?
Yeah, it's my ancestors that founded it. His name is also Lucas Bols.
I hope he left you something in his will, did he?
Well, only one paragraph that says like the name Bols and the family Bols should always, until eternity, be respected and honored by the Royal Bols distilleries. So every 4 years we have a huge family party in Amsterdam at the distilleries, and they send me like presents every year with my birthday because I'm the last one that's immediately connected to the old Lucas Bols from 1575. And so yeah, it's a crazy story. Family, they started off the VOC, the East Indian Company. First case of industrial espionage took place then. Like it's a cool story. I'll tell you about it later.
It's a whole interview in itself, I have to say, Lucas. I've opened up a lovely Pandora's box there.
There you go.
It's amazing. Now, what you do for a living is am I correct in saying you're a film director or a cinematographer, or is there a difference?
Well, it's a bit dual. So I'm a director, both for television and for cinema. So I've been working on a couple of short movies for a couple of years now. And for the rest, my daily business is advertising, is TV. I'm a promo producer too, so I create movie trailers. So storytelling in general is my thing.
And no, can I get it straight? Are you in Holland or Belgium?
No, Belgium, yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to take all of your time because I know what a busy man you are. We'll come to that a little bit later. So if we can just get in on the paranormal end of things. When you were a young film student, you decided to do a kind of a project. So you take it from there.
Okay. So, well, as a film student, you have to make like a short movie or a documentary or something audiovisual connected to your interest and what you do. So it's like a thesis somehow, but then in film form. Mm-hmm. So I was really interested in one place that I came across, and it was supposed to be a ghost house. In this little Dutch town named Sas van Ghent. It's not so very far from Ghent. Okay, so we, together with two other people in my class, we started this endeavor, and we wanted to do something Blair Witch. 2003, I think, because I just came back from Australia where I lived for some time, and then started studying again, and then we had to do this. So, well, this ghost house was quite interesting because it has a really long history of strange happenings, and it was a house right on the border with Belgium, so between Holland and Belgium. And it was raised around 1890, I think, or 1885. Yeah, I think it was that. And it was like the director's house of a glass factory in Sas van Ghent. So it's a very static building. It's like a manor. We started researching this place, and we found out that because it was right on the border, there used to be an electric fencing across that border, so across the house, and a lot of people were fusilated or shot by the Germans in those days because they were smuggling. Always on the border area, there's a lot of smuggling going on for butter, for alcohol, for cows, whatever. A lot of people died. They were electrocuted or shot. Then in the Second World War, I think there was a lot of fighting in the area too. So there was a Canadian tank that rode on the boulevard of the house, and it was shot or bombed. I don't really know what.
I think a mine went off. The little bit of research I did, killed 4 Canadian soldiers.
Yeah. So 4 people died right on the on the property of the house. And then we started looking into, like, next to the history, we started looking into, like, what happened there? Why do people call this a ghost house? We ended up, like, interviewing the police, like the local police of Sas van Ghent. Well, they said, like, yeah, there's no real proof of it, that stuff is happening there. But if you look at, like, the records of, like, car accidents and stuff that happens there, there's, well, quite a lot of stuff that happened in the past 10 years. Some people complain that the engines of their vehicles, whether it is like a motorcycle or a moped or a car, the engine stops. So when they're passing by the house, the engine suddenly stops, and then they have to react fast. There's been, like, quite some deadly accidents, but it's not a special road. There's no traffic. It's just like a little bit of a curb that you drive through, but that's it. So the police couldn't really explain, like, all these deadly accidents and engines of the cars shut down and this and that. So they said, like, something must be going on, something magnetic, or I don't know.
Atmospheric.
Atmospheric, who knows? And okay, so next step was we took a couple of stones from the house and we went to a paranormal fair.
Were there men and women, or?
Yeah, so there was one girl, her name was Caroline, and one of my friends, like Wouter, was also there. So the three of us were making the film. And then, like, we had some extras and actors, well, that we hired. Also, there was, like, a big, how do you call it? Like, when soldiers from the First World War, Second World War, reenactment groups, like those things. So to reenact, like, parts of the history of the house. And so, okay, we took some stones of the house and we went to a paranormal fair in Leuven, in the Brabanthallen, it's called. It's like a big fair where people gather. There's, like, some sketchy stuff going on, but also some quite amazing things have come from it. Like, there's people there that are quite gifted, and they've worked for the intelligence services. Even some people say they worked for the FBI to solve some murders and all that. Anyways, we wanted to hand out, like, these stones to 3 different paranormally gifted people that we looked up, and we thought, like, okay, these people are the most plausible and believable of the whole bunch that was there.
It's a very novel idea. Great idea to do that in the first place.
It's so you can compare. So everybody makes its own story, and that's actually what happened. So we gave the stones to the first paranormally gifted person. I don't know how you call that.
A medium or a psychic, yeah.
Maybe something like that, yeah, indeed. And this person felt a strong relation to the stones, and he started talking about that he saw a blonde man. That person ended up somehow in the house, and he saw a plane fly over, and he think, like, the plane crashed down somewhere. So, okay, there was, like, some pieces of a story of maybe a blonde person that ended up in the house. He lost all traces of that person after that, so he didn't know what happened. So the next paranormally medium read the stones, and more of this story came out. But when he first took one of the stones in his hands, like, one of the big lights of the expo hall where we were fell down, and it fell right next to the medium.
Wow.
So we were like, what the fuck?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excuse my friend.
Yeah, no, not at all.
And then, of course, like, the medium said, like, it's connected to the stone, and it's a sign that we should look into this, and blah, blah, blah. But we proceeded. The organization came in, and they kind of placed all the stands where the people were sitting away from the lights, so they took it serious, like, what happened. And then this person started talking somehow about the same thing. It's an airplane with a red ball underneath the wing. He saw, like, a pond or a swamp, and then the people from the house, they found that person somewhere, somehow. Okay, another part of the story. Third person was the same.
Can I just ask you a question before we get into the third person?
Sure.
And that's, were they all in the same room at the time you conducted these stone tests, or were they separate?
They were separate.
So they weren't getting a lead off each other, is what I'm saying.
No, not at all, not at all. Because, like, they didn't know of each other either. Like, so they didn't know that they were participating on the same thing.
All right, my apologies. Into the third medium then.
Yeah, the third medium continued the story, and what we actually found out, like it's okay. So if you combine the three stories, is that a British RAF flyer, person with blonde hair, crashed a plane somewhere in a swamp not so very far from the house, and the people from the house must have seen it. They went to the plane or to the swamp, and they got the soldier out, they got the pilot out, and they took it to the house. That's the whole story that we got.
Right.
Of course, there's no proof. There was nothing, no record about like a plane crashing down. We looked into the archives of Sas van Ghent. So, okay, we were left with just somehow useless information, but it was really interesting.
But it all tallied.
Yeah, it all tallied, and that really got our interest. So we called Joost Knopf, and Joost Knopf, I think he died, but he was like the ghost hunter.nl. So he was the most prestigious ghost hunter that Holland had. He took some cases in Hungary, I think, where he found like in a haunted house, like he found like a priest locked into behind a wall, like a 16th century priest that was locked up there. So he found that skeleton, and after they found that skeleton, like the haunting stopped. Triggered us to call him. So we took him to the house. And well, he knew of the house, like he'd been there several times before that. Yeah, we were walking around, and he said like, you can take pictures. So in every living space of the house, it was a ruin at that time.
I was just going to ask, what condition was it in? Was it kind of emptied out at that stage of furniture, or was it a shell, or?
Yeah, I think it was just a shell. So it didn't have any floors anymore, it didn't have a ceiling. So the interior, it was just walls that were going up.
But the facade was holding up, so.
That's it, yeah. So it was tricky to walk around there. But we walked through there. We said to meet around 11 o'clock in the evening, and then go around the house. And he was going to tell us...
Sorry, what time of year was this? Is it winter or...?
Yeah, it should be winter time, like February, March.
Extra chills, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
So there you are, 11 o'clock on a winter's night.
Yeah.
And you're in the house. What happens?
Well, first we walked around the house.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was no windows and no doors anymore, you could see through the house. And every now and then he was taking pictures, this Joost. And well, one of the things he showed us at that time, like one of the first pictures he took, it showed like an orb, like ball that was in the living room, or where the living room had been. But the little ball, it did have a little tail behind it, which kind of showed a direction. So this little tail kind of showed that the ball was moving left. So we continued, and we went to the left, and there was a hallway. He took some pictures there, and you could kind of see the ball there, but the tail shifted.
This was on video?
No, it was on
or
photo.
Static?
Static.
Okay. So I like a normal camera.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Well, he said it was like a special kind of camera.
Sure, infrared or something. Yeah.
It looked like a normal camera.
Okay.
And so he took like 4 or 5 of these pictures with this orb thing flying around. I'd never heard about it, like an orb. But he said like it's one of the main manifestations of an entity or an energy source that's still present somewhere. And we were intrigued, but there was nothing scary about it. It was just like, okay, you saw it on the pictures. First we thought like maybe it's some dust, or maybe it's like some humidity or I don't know what. You always try to look for logic in these things. So, okay, that happened. Then we talked to the neighbors of the house. We did some interviews with them. And, well, they had some weird experiences, as in, like, okay, energy drops, like the phone would suddenly not work anymore. And sometimes there would be lights around the house that they couldn't explain.
Yes.
But a lot of it, I think they blamed on people that were doing, like...
ghost hunting.
Ghost hunting, or with, how do you say that? Like with a wiki board, or to search for.
Oh yes, so they'd be like a black mass or something like that, where it gets kind of dark, shall we say, in terms of what they're trying to do. Yeah,
I think so, and with
like devil worshippers or.
Probably those were there too, because we saw like a big Satan kind of.
The pentagram.
Inside. So that was interesting. But for the rest, yeah, okay. So we finished the movie. Nothing really happened except like, yeah, you get a weird feeling sometimes, like the chills. But it was winter time, so
Yeah.
we could explain that. And now, years and years later, I think it was 15 years or 17 years later, I was looking through the newspaper and I saw a news bulletin of that they found something in Sas van Ghent. In the village where the house was. It's the house in the meantime has been completely destroyed. I've done an interview with the owner at the time, and he was like a big, I don't know, businessman, like a factory holder, and he wanted to sell the land or so. I don't know what happened. Anyways, the house doesn't exist anymore.
But that would be, half of people would have been really annoyed about that, and I'd say probably half were quite happy.
I think so. I think the neighbors were quite happy that.
Yes.
Thing. A lot of people, they were angry because they lost part of the history and the intrigue. They couldn't really explain.
Notoriety and maybe a bit of economy as well.
I think so. And I think touristically, it's kind of interesting to have a ghost house, like a known ghost house. I think I know there's a lot of them in England, and it's a big tourist attraction there. So. But anyways, like I saw this news bulletin, and it said they found something in Sas van Ghent. They found an RAF plane not so very far from the house in a swamp.
Wow.
So it had sunken down. And if they link the plane, to who flew it at the time that it lifted off, it was a blonde soldier. I don't remember the name.
Yes.
I don't believe it said so in the news.
The logs or the. Yeah.
Yeah, and then after 17 years, I recalled everything. You know, it's like, wow, this whole story kind of makes sense now. It's a circle that has found its conclusion, and somehow I was so happy. Yeah.
And you know, it was a story in itself that you'd gone there 15 years prior and and uncovered all this. You know, that to me is as much a story as the plane itself being discovered.
I think so. But you never know what's true or what's not. In the same case, like it's just an invention that people that are sensitive to certain things pick up, and they tell you this and you believe it, but you never know. But this thing is kind of like, okay, now we know that there's something really feasible about their story and their powers too, I guess. Like
it was a vindication.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So that's kind of my story about that house in Sas van Ghent.
And you've never had anything happen since at all, or that made you think?
I have a lot of things.
Are you sensitive to those things? Are you interested in them, or is it just by it happens and it's one of those things that make you go, ooh?
I'm really interested, first of all, but I'm skeptical. But
that's healthy, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. You have to.
You have to.
But the place where I grew up, like we have a lot of Celtic roots, like not Celtic as in Ireland, but the Celts as in
a tribe.
The tribes that lived here, the Gauls, they call them too in those days.
Yes, the Gauls.
Yeah.
Famous dying Gaul. It's a statue.
It's a beautiful statue.
Isn't it?
I know what it is. Yeah. With the wire around the neck.
Oh, wow, yeah. Yeah, you see around there as well, you get what's called bog bodies. Have you ever heard of that?
That's in Holland, the bog bodies.
Yeah, bog bodies. We have them here in Ireland as well.
You do, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, the bog bodies, because they're actually sacrifices.
They are. And in one case, you know, I definitely know, I think it might be up in Denmark, but the ligature, you can see it. It's there.
Yeah, there you go.
Horrible.
I've seen a couple of them, like here in Ghent. Like we had an exhibition in the Gravensteen. It's the castle of the Dukes. It's like right in the middle of Ghent, a 13th century castle, and they had a couple of bog bodies there. It's beautiful. Like they're tiny. It kind of feels like the people have shrunk a little bit. Like
yes,
they're completely black, but you see the whole texture of their skin, their clothes, like everything's there. It's
I was amazed as well at the condition of the hands. They're almost, some of them might have been of a higher class or something. They're manicure nearly, you know.
Oh, really?
You can see the hands are just so beautiful. Have you encountered anything, even auditory sounds? You know, I was talking to a guy in the States a few years ago, and he pitched up camp in a desert one night. And he was on his own in the Arizona desert, I think. And he just said, look, I've never had anything paranormal happen in my life. but this occasion, and that was an auditory thing. He said, I could hear this noise. It was like I was surrounded by birds flapping or fish in a shoal. He said it was a noise of nature, but it engulfed the tent. He said, I went outside at 2 a.m. in the morning. He said, really afraid, and I could hear it, but I couldn't see anything apart from the desert stars. I interrupted you there. Sorry, old son.
No worries. It's an interesting story. It's something similar when I lived in Australia. I stayed there for, I don't know, like a year or so. And I met some Japanese people. Australia's full of Japanese people. And we hung out like one evening in their homestay parents' house. Well, we were looking around through the house, and we found all these pictures of 19th century pictures, I think, of people that were posing. But then we looked better at the pictures, and it was actually like one person that was alive and the other person was dead, but they made it look as if the dead person was still alive. They did that in those days.
There was a trend, I think, for that kind of thing. Yeah, even in Victorian times, photographing the dead, you know?
Yeah. And so because it cost a lot of money, taking a picture, and most people didn't have like a picture of their loved one before they died. So they made them look as if they were alive and took a picture of post-mortem, which is kind of interesting. But okay, so we found these pictures and we were kind of, this is weird. Like this person really had thousands of these pictures. So we continued, like we had some wine and we had some food. I think we made burgers that evening. And then suddenly, like in Australia, like it was in cairns. A lot of houses, they have like a ground level. And then there's like the living level is on top of that. Like, so people live on the first floor, and below that it's kind of like a garage. They do have some sofas and all that, and some fridges and this and that. But it's more just a general area where people enter the house. So we were sitting on the first floor, and suddenly we heard this piano music coming from downstairs. And we were like, well, this is weird, because there was nobody there. And for as much as my Japanese friend knew, there was no piano there.
Yeah.
So I think we were 5 people. And the Japanese, they were immediately a bit afraid, but they have a different culture than us. So everything with them is kind of related or linked with their ancestors. These weird things happen, like it can be something very scary for them, or it can be something very positive, but they look at it as a kind of vision or so. I don't know, they tried to explain, but it wasn't completely clear. So we got up and we started walking downstairs, and when we entered this space on the ground floor, like what you said just now, like the piano music was all around us. It didn't come from one direction. It just embalmed us, like in beautiful, soft kind of music, but we couldn't see where it was coming from. So I was looking for like a radio or like music boxes on the ceiling. Maybe there was like 4 boxes, I thought, like where the sound would come from, but there was no music boxes. So that was a really weird experience. From the moment we touched the floor, like with all 5 of us, like the music stopped and it didn't return anymore. But it was like we were completely engulfed with this beautiful piano music.
This melody. Tell me, could you tell what type of music it was? Like European, or would it have been Japanese, or is it just tranquil?
It was very tranquil European music. It's a bit in the style of a Moonlight Sonata of Beethoven.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Can I just tell you something very personal? Within the last 3 days, my sister's husband died.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he was 75 and he'd been ill, but he was very British.
Yeah.
And she was sharing with me her thoughts yesterday, because she was obviously it was the first time I'd phoned her since it had happened. And she said, David was a lovely man, but very stiff upper lip British, and he didn't come on with the big bunches of flowers or anything like that. Yeah. And she said, and the other thing was, Moonlight Sonata would bring him to tears.
There you go. Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Yesterday.
So can I ask one more question then, because I don't want to take up all your time, because you are busy with Anwin, the movie is in production and you're in the funding stage, etc. But I get feelings about people, right? And I've always liked you, the few conversations we've had, but I think you're a very kind person. How do you feel like about animals? And would you pick up on anything I won't even say paranormal, but maybe spiritual, because like, I'll be honest with you, I have a cat. He must be about 20 feet from where I am. And that thing, I call him, he's more like a dog at times, but he's human. He knows me. I pick up on stuff. Does Lucas have any animals in his life?
Well, we've always had cats.
Yeah.
So we have 2 cats right now. It's like two little boys. But I've always had the ability to make a very fast connection with animals. I think like with dogs a little less.
It's usually the opposite, isn't it? People like with cats. I always feel like, if I mention do you like cats to people, I'm ready to kind of come to the cat's defense, because so many people kind of go, yikes, no, don't. And and it's usually female, funny enough. And I used to think, is it your femininity is threatened in some way? Now, I don't mean that to sound like sexist, but it was the vehemence with which females don't like cats, whereas guys kind of go, oh, I'm not a cat person, I'm more of a dog person. Whereas sometimes a woman, in my experience anyway, will almost recoil. Yeah. About cats. No.
There's a lot of understanding with cats, I think, or that's kind of what people put on cats. Like, it's like they feel like a cat understands them when they're down.
Very much, yeah.
It's a solace, someone that I know, for example, she's doing horse therapy at the moment.
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah.
And well, I was filming a couple of years back in a farm, and they used the horses to find cancer. So it happened a couple of times because they had a chiropractor doing practices with the horses, but then they would introduce people in the stable, and the horse would also be present while the chiropractor was doing his thing. A couple of times the horse would go to a certain area on the body, and it would keep on going to that same location, and then after that happened, the person thought that was really weird.
Yeah.
I think a month later, 2 months later, they found out that there was cancer. I think there was pancreas cancer or so, and the person returned back to the farm and said it's really weird because the horse was always pointing at that direction and always came there, and maybe there's something more to it. And then they did some research, and it seems like horses have that ability to find those kind of things too. There's nothing visibly shown.
It's something you really tend to associate more so with a dog or a pig with truffles, but the horse, with a horse, to me, it's the eyes have it. When you look in those beautiful eyes. But that's an amazing story. Tell me about the movie that's in production, because we've a lot of US listeners to this. Besides it, the podcast is called Scary Eire, Eire being the Gaelic word for Ireland. So just repeat after me, by the way. I have to do this. Lucas, just say Begora.
Begora.
There you go. So I now knight you officially an honorary Irish person so that I can defend the material. No, it's generally Gaelic and Irish related, but we never let it get in the way of a good story. Onwin, spell that for me.
Onwin is Annwyn.
And it seems to me, from the bit voiceover I was involved in, which did bring me to tears, I have to say, the kind of village scene or the guy coming home. Just tell us about it, what stage it's at, and we shall call it a day.
Yeah, sure. Onwin is what I would name a historic sci-fi film. I've completely funded it myself. In Belgium there's a wave of that they're taking away cultural subsidies these days.
So no arts grant, no?
There is nowadays they're back, but when I launched my production, there was some issues, and there was 60% less subsidies in the 2 years that I launched. So I was really unhappy and unlucky.
Totally understand that.
But anyways, I did it anyways. I was in a burnout, and I wanted to get out. So the movie was a whole introspection really into myself and my demons and my hope of becoming my better self again, because I was really down and out back then. Anyways, I started making the movie. It's a story about, first of all, a chapter where you have a Celtic farmer that arrives at his farm, and his wife and kid have been killed by the Romans. Afterwards, he doesn't know what to do with his sadness, so he tries everything to deal with the sadness. Like you have to see the movie, but it's in general, the whole movie is about like despair, sadness, how people deal with it over a period of 6,000 years, starting with the Celtic farmer, 100 BC, and we go like 4,000 years in the future. There is a British soldier, Charlie is his name, like he's lost his regiment and ends up in the Belgian trenches about minutes before like the Germans start their first use of chlorine gas on the Western Front in Belgium. And then there is Araun, like he's the ruler of Anwin. Anwin, I don't know if you know, the Celts, they believed in like a parallel world that existed next to ours, where people could be what they weren't in real life.
What a lovely concept. I wasn't aware of that.
They could wear a mask to be, for example, you were a simple farmer, but you could wear the mask of a warrior, and then in that world you would be a warrior. There's many legends about it, like the ruler of Anwin, his name is Araun, and I've included him in the movie as the person that can open up a gateway to the afterlife somehow. That's because a lot of how we've created heaven is based on a lot of historical stories and images that people have created over the years. So the Viking, Valhalla, for example, Anwin, heaven, everything's connected. So there's images of all those religions that kind of overlap. So this person is always present, this Araun. He's here at the beginning of times. He's in the First World War. He's at the Celt, he's always present, and he just watches, and he kind of gives like tools to the people to have a look into this Anwin, into this other world, and how life could be different.
Yes.
But it's also an illusion. So he tries to get these people into believing something that's not so positive as it seems. So don't be gullible, like death and evil is everywhere, that kind of idea. Well, we're 8 years in production now. The shooting has been, it's finished. We shot for 3 years, I think, because I didn't have any money. It took quite a long time because I was working 2-3 shifts per day to fund 1 weekend of shooting every 3 months, I think it was. We had about 49 shooting days in France and Germany, Belgium, Holland, Iceland. So visually it's fantastic. It's just alone Iceland it's like
I was just going to say that would have been the jewel in the crown, really.
It's fantastic.
Iceland.
I wanted to have like a post-apocalyptic world, and that's what you found there. So, and then now we're at the end of the post-production phase, but we still have some costs. There's grading, some special effects that need to be done, like some of the sound design still needs to be finished. So I started off a crowdfunding campaign on Ulule, and that I've launched on Instagram, on Facebook, on
good. Under Unwin, is it?
Yeah.
Or
there you go.
GoFundMe, or what is it, Kickstarter?
Yeah, ulule.com. It's kind of specialized in film.
How's that spelt?
ulele.com.
Okay.
And then if you type in Anwin, ANNWYN, then you'll end up there. You can also find a link on Instagram and Facebook. It's Anwin_the movie.
Well, Lucas, it's actually an idea that has been emboldened somewhat as well and accepted, that trauma dating back eons can be kept, I think, I'm very layman here, but genetically the trauma can be imbued, the theory is anyway, and carry on through generations. As recently as the Holocaust, relatives of Holocaust victims have apparently this thing in them, this trauma. I can't explain how it manifests, but it's accepted now that, and I'm sure the same goes on with slavery. And what you don't hear about often at all is the Irish famine, which in itself was a Holocaust. I mean, it was kind of by design. People tell you it's just to do with potatoes. And listen, there was plenty of fish in the sea in Ireland and lots of vegetables besides potatoes. So there was a lot went on there that people never discuss. So, and the trauma of it, I know just, even if it's just word of mouth and nothing to do with DNA, it goes on and remains. I suppose it's history, but in present form.
Yeah. Just plain misery, really.
Plain misery. But anyway, you helped bring us out of that with all the kind of colours and everything, because I've seen the rushes and it's amazing. So people will know now, if they have deep pockets, where to go.
There you go.
Lucas, it's been lovely talking to you. Indeed, I could talk to you more, but I do respect your time. I know how busy you are. It's a great story, as I said, the Lucas Bols story to begin with.
Yeah, well...
I said, wow, this guy has the same name as... I'm sure there's a few ghosts in that family as well, eh?
Well, who knows? Like, we still have to find them, but yeah, they're there.
Okay. Cheers, Lucas. Lovely talking to you.
You too, Mark.
Okay. Well, that's it, or as we say in Gaelic, Shin A. My thanks to Paranormal UK Radio for hosting Scary Eire, and indeed my two guests today. Weren't they fantastic? Kieran Fanning, author, and filmmaker Lucas Bols. We broadcast and slingshot this show to whatever corner of the world you are in from the island of Ireland. We've got tombstones older than some countries' histories. We're a passionate lot. Or in the words of the late great poet William Butler Yeats, out of Ireland have we come. Great hatred, little room, maimed us at the start. I carry from my mother's womb a fanatic heart. So until next time, keep a little mark in your heart. Take care, 'cause I care. Goodbye. Slán leat.